So during a debate Thursday, Joe Biden mentioned that he's going to transition from fossil fuel to green energy, and everybody's focusing on that. But he said something else that nobody's talking about, and he needs to be asked about this time and time again until we get a sufficient answer. He said that we need to be at um, zero emissions by 2025. That's 5 years from now. Zero emissions by 2025. I don't, I don't even know how we accomplish that unless we go take the country back to the dark ages. We don't have solar panels to put on 737 so they can fly around. Think about this for a minute. Zero emissions by 2025. Virtually every industry in America has to go. We can't, other than solar panel and wind, because we don't have the technology on the other stuff, regardless of what they tell you. How are we going to power America? How are we going to power our factories? How, what are we all supposed to get rid of our gas guzzling vehicles and buy electric vehicles that don't have the range to drive cross country by 2025? How many of us can even afford that? The airlines got to go. That means airports got to go. How many jobs is that going to put out? We can't farm unless um, um, farmers go out and get rid of all their gas guzzling tillers and everything else, planters, and buy electric powered ones, which we don't have the technology to do that yet. But how are farmers going to afford that? We're going to go back to a hoe and a sickle for weeding? Railroads, gone. uh, you're not going to be able to mow your grass unless you go out and buy a battery powered thing. But then again, how are you going to charge it? And how are you going to make solar panels without petroleum? How are you going to make windmills without petroleum? How are you going to make battery banks without petroleum? How are you going to produce these items without making emissions? It's impossible. Utterly impossible. I, you know, let me tell you this little story about the left. When I first got out of the military, I took a position as a service director for a alternative energy company. What we would take is we were taking Doosan's Daewoo's bus engines, converting them to natural gas. We had a very advanced catalytic converter on there, and we were producing low emissions. Well, South Coast, which is basically LA, airborne resources, uh, they had an extremely low NOx rating. Nobody can meet it except a few certain little turbines. I mean, you had to uh, no natural gas engine can meet it. Well, we went down there, and um, what they would do is you had to hire this contractor, and he'd come up with his van with all his high-priced testing equipment. And at the time, at a cost of about $15,000, he'd run his lines up, stick them in your exhaust, and sit there and measure it. And you had to run an hour. And I'm telling you, these were extremely low numbers. And I remember there was 2 engineers from the board up there on the rooftop with us while we were doing this test. And during that hour, if you spiked just once, you failed the test. You could put your nose up to our exhaust and it smelled like a dryer. So we get up there and we passed this test. And the engineers from the resource board are like, they didn't believe it. So they made us do the test again, at our cost, of course, another $15,000. And we do it again, and we passed it again. They were all giddy. They were excited. Well, it got up to the California Air Resource Board, which at the time was run by a hippie that did way too much acid back in the day. And he lowered the numbers, just arbitrarily. Well, we met them numbers again. When we met him again, he lowered them again. Now, we were producing 220 kW of electricity and 110 tons of chilled water. And we were putting about the same emissions in the air as you would driving your Volkswagen around the block. So we were putting the same emission, we were producing all that power in an hour, and you would produce the same amount of emissions just driving your Volkswagen around the block one time. What's he do? He gets up in front of a board meeting and states that the goal isn't to get lower emissions. It was to drive all fossil fuel engines out of California. That's where the left is. No matter what you do, it's never going to be enough for them, because their goal is not clean air. Their goal is not clean water. Their goal is control and power. And again, I don't know if this was a gaffe by Joe Biden. I don't even see how we get to zero emissions in 2050. I don't even 2075, 2100. I don't see. There's not enough technology on the horizon right now for us to be able to do that. Meanwhile, China, India, Russia can pollute all they want, and nobody cares about that. But I guess they live on a different planet. You know, we're the ones destroying the planet, not them. All right, thank you all. Have a good day. Bye.